Hi, everyone, and welcome back to that UFO podcast. My name is Andy, and today I am joined by a lawyer, court interpreter, translator, and UFO researcher, Samuel Chong. Samuel, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Andy.
It's very good to have you on. Very excited to have a conversation, perhaps a little bit different to the norm. So often people ask me to get perspectives on the UFO topic from outside of the United States. And here we are. We're going to talk all things UFOs with a conversation rooted in a little bit of religion, a little bit of spirituality. We're going to talk aliens. We're going to talk abductions, and what I want to do is start off with you, Samuel, as a person. And can you just tell me a little bit about your background and kind of what's brought you to talking about UFOs?
I was born in Beijing, China, back a few decades ago, and I studied in elementary school and middle school in China. Back then, China was fairly open in terms of getting the public to know about Qigong or the energy works, unidentified flying objects, the flying saucers, and also things about spirituality. So I was very interested in learning about the paranormal activities that people saw in the world. For example, who built the Great Pyramid of Egypt? What happens in the Bermuda Triangle? What happens after we die? And is there life after death? So I was very interested in those subject matters. So I did a lot of research. I read a lot of books on that matters. Um, and I came to the US and improved my English, and I started to read more books on those subjects. And I was thinking if the ETs could come and visit us, they must have advanced technologies and knowledge, and we can just learn from them so that we can progress at a much faster pace. Because in China, there were a lot of news stories about contacts of people with extraterrestrials. And there was one news article that I read that I remember still that a physicist was being taken by the ETs to their spacecraft. And then the physicist was told that even though Einstein laid the three fundamental principles of physics, there's one small mistake that made people believe that we cannot cross a light barrier. Um, and that actually struck me uh, like heavily because I think we can actually learn a lot from the ETs. So that's the motivation that I had to begin a lot of research.
So it sounds like you've got a basis in the UFO topic and the paranormal and the mysteries of the world. Similar to myself, I enjoyed reading about the pyramids, the Bermuda Triangle, the Loch Ness monster when I was a kid, and your interest kind of grew from there. I believe you've been in the United States now. Is it 25 years?
Yes, it's been actually more than 25 years.
More than 25 years now.
Yeah,
And you're
30
obviously a
years.
lawyer. 30,
Yes, I'm
30
a lawyer
years.
in Yes, I'm a lawyer in California. I've been here more than 30 years actually.
So let's talk about China first. And so many folks, when I said you were going to be on, Samuel, wanted to know what is the conversation around UFOs like in China historically, and how does it differ to the West?
Well, in the 1980s, China was fairly open to translating articles on UFOs into Chinese language. And then there was a very famous magazine in China called UFO Magazine, 飞碟探索, exploring the UFO phenomena. And it was very, very popular among the people, the general public. The government itself was not encouraging or discouraging the research activities of the civilians. And they really didn't really promote it nor discourage it. So people were just doing their own things. And but in the early 2000s or so, because of certain religious movements in China, the government started to become more strict in censoring uh, documents or articles or books related to the qigong or the energy practices, exercises that the Chinese public did in the past. And then they also censored a lot of the books written on the UFO subject matter. So after the 2000s, people began to really do their own research without promoting it publicly. There were quite a few incidents in which the Chinese people reportedly had contacts with the ETs or people who had supernatural abilities. And those were well documented and researched by civilian groups, but not necessarily the Chinese government. Um, and people are also very interested in the recent movements in the U.S., the witnesses testifying in the Congress in the U.S. So it's mostly like a civilian interest, not necessarily a government interest.
What are some of the most well-known cases that would be discussed in China? Is there a Roswell that would translate over to China, for example?
For example, there was an incident in northeastern part of China in which a farmer was in touch with a ET, and then he had encounter with the ET, and he claimed that the ET actually impregnated him, and then causing uh, or actually he impregnated the ET and then causing uh, a a baby to be born. And then he was actually researched by a few scientists in China and did hypnosis and also things like that. And it turned out that his descriptions were believed to be accurate. There was also another person in China who claimed that he was taken by ETs to a planet called the Guoke planet. And then he wrote books and then was quite popular in China for his stories. And then some of his books were actually published in English. And I think those are some of the well-known cases of contacts with ETs or UFOs in China.
How do the public react to those cases? I think in the West there tends to be a general interest, but a lot of folks would either be dismissive of the notion of aliens or abductions. Is it similar in China?
Well, in China, people kind of the traditional Chinese people believed such stories because in the ancient times there were fairy tales or maybe stories of Chinese people in touch with gods or goddesses and who had supernatural abilities or powers. So people believed in stories of extraterrestrial contact more easily for those who are more traditional. But people who study modern science tend to believe in the books taught by their teachers or professors. So those people are more skeptical. But I really want to talk about like a recent phenomenon in which a book was translated into Chinese, in which it became massively popular, and people believe the stories to be true. And I think it actually caused a quite different mentality to the people who read the books, in which I think the Chinese mentality began to change and towards more like the spiritual and also other aspects of their belief systems.
Let's talk about the book then, and I think we'll circle back round because I think a lot of the conversation is going to bleed very much into that. So the book, I would pronounce it the Thiaoouba Prophecy, The Golden Planet by Michel Desmarquet. But pronunciation is quite interesting because there's a different pronunciation which then has connotations for the religious aspect of this, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. The author is actually a French Australian, and if you pronounce the word in French, it is actually Jehovah. It's very similar to the word Jehovah. Is the name of the planet in which the author was believed to be taken to for 9 days and then came back. And actually, he brought a lot of interesting knowledge that would reveal a lot of the secrets that we haven't heard about.
Yeah, so you've got the author Michel Desmarquet. He claims to have been abducted. He's written this book. Why is this book far less well known in the UK and the US than it seems to have been across in China and other countries? What was it that captured the imagination there?
Yes, first of all, it is popular in China because I believe that especially after the year 2000s, after the censorship became more strict in China, people wanted such information, wanted such knowledge, wanted such stories of ET contacts, but couldn't find anything. And then this book came into the Chinese market as a fiction, science fiction, but it's so real that people who read the book immediately began to feel that this is not a science fiction. This is a real encounter of the author's story, who actually was born in France and then came to Australia and had an ET close encounter with the highly advanced civilization, and then went to their planet and then came back with knowledge and specific verifiable facts that convinced them to be true. And then this book actually began to be extremely popular in China because there was a debate on what the book says and the interpretation of the book, especially with the connections of the ancient scriptures of Buddha texts and also the Bible, the Old Testament, the New Testament. And people began to correlate and then corroborate the information contained in the ancient scriptures with a description of this book. Especially the people in China, some of them know the book of Enoch, know the Old Testament, especially they're keen to understanding the Buddhist text. So they combine everything and then to really analyze the descriptions in the book and find that the book to be extremely interesting and revealing. And I think it's less popular in the UK and the US because there are so many more interesting ufology books or texts that people can read and realize, and especially people have been focusing the attention on the witnesses who testified in the U.S. Congress about crashed UFO retrievals. So this is the attention that the media has led people to focus on. And also, there's another reason, is that the French-Australian author of the book Thiaoouba Prophecy was a farmer in Australia who didn't have a lot of education, who didn't have a lot of connections to the ufologists and also the people who study UFOs. And then he really didn't have the resources to promote his book. So in the US and the UK, the book is not as popular as in China, Japan, South Korea, or other countries in Asia.
Am I correct? In China, given the censorship issues there, it's published under a science fiction label, which allows it to escape some of that more extreme or harsh censorship. Whereas outside, for example, in Taiwan, it's published under non-fiction. Is that correct?
That's correct. In China, they also removed a few sentences that talks about communism and also talks about Russia or the 1989 event. So the Chinese version is a censored version, removing like a few sentences from the original work of the author.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the actual abduction itself and what happened to Michel?
Well, it happened in 1987 in Cairns, Australia, in which the author woke up in the middle of the night. He didn't know why, but he wrote a note to his wife saying that he'll be gone for 10 days and there's absolutely no need to worry about him. And then he walked outside of his house and then he was lifted up to the middle of the air where he met or encountered a very beautiful, gigantic, very tall ET wearing a space suit. And then he was told that they're going to have a journey together for a few days, and then he'll be back in good health. So they actually stopped in a parallel universe in which he was told that this is a natural phenomenon in which people near such portals or warps get stuck into it, and then unless they know how to get out, they're forever stuck there. So this actually explains why there are so many planes and ships missing in near the Bermuda Triangle area, and why there are so many people who disappear or vanish in some of the spots in national parks in the US or Canada, as reported or documented by David Paulides, called the Missing 411 series of books. He was a great private investigator in this area. And then after they stopped briefly in the parallel universe, they went inside of a spacecraft, which is a spherical 100-meter in diameter spacecraft. The author, Michel, was disinfected using yellow light and blue light because according to the ETs, the bacteria on Earth would be causing harm to the people on their planet, Thiaoouba. So they used the yellow light and blue light to disinfect him. And I did some research. It turned out that the yellow light and blue light have antibacterial, antiviral effects, as proven by peer-reviewed journals, such as those written by Harvard Medical School and also other scientists. They also used other means to disinfect him. He had an out-of-body experience during the disinfection process, using a kind of what they would call radiation as well. And then they stopped, before they reached their destination, they stopped on a planet, which just had a nuclear holocaust. And then they explained to the author what happened to that planet, and then what they're going to be doing over there. Actually, they provided assistance to the residents on the planet indirectly and sometimes directly as well, just to cause them to survive, to help them to survive. So this book has a lot of very interesting details about the history of Earth, where we all came from, and also a lot of other interesting descriptions of the planet in which Michel went to.
Now, you're a lawyer, Samuel, and that's someone who is trained to weigh evidence and think critically for a job. What convinced you personally that the experiences described within the book are credible and worth your time?
Well, there are several things. One is that the book is very specific on the names and also on the numbers and the years. For example, it mentioned about the secret, used to be secret project of the US government, in which the government sent hundreds of millions of needles into space. The book specifically says that if people don't believe it, they can just ask their leaders about that experiment or that project. And I did some research that turned out to be Project Westford in the 1960s, in which the US government really did send out hundreds of millions of copper needles into space in order to help to improve the telecommunication signals at that time. And then the ETs believed that the needles would be harmful to the people on Earth, so they collected the needles. So I did some research. So they did the US government tried to send hundreds of millions of needles into space, but for a few times they failed the project. So this documented, and you can research it on Wikipedia and other credible sources. So this is just one example of how detailed the information contained in the book is. And also, what struck me personally was about the stories in the Bible. I came to the US in 1993, and I went to some of the Christian churches in my community. I really didn't believe anything written in the Bible, because to me, what Christ performed, the miracles, were just too incredible to be true. I didn't believe any of the magics or magicians as described in the Bible, including the Old Testaments during Exodus. Those kind of stories were just too fantastical to be true. But this book actually did mention what really happened during Exodus and during Christ's time. And actually, it made a lot of sense to me, because when I was reading the New Testament, I was thinking, like, why there's no record of Jesus performing miracles before he began preaching. Like, it just, he became like suddenly a totally different person after he was baptized by John the Baptist, and then he began to preach and began to perform miracles. It's just too incredible. Like a person didn't show his abilities to perform miracles when he was young. And there was also stories about Jesus going to India, credible stories on that. So this book really tells what really happened was that Jesus, the one who was born out of Virgin Mary, was indeed born of a virgin. He was born from the embryo implanted by the ETs to the uterus of Virgin Mary. The young Jesus, because he was born that way, he didn't remember the knowledge to perform miracles. So the young Jesus, the one who was born out of Virgin Mary, even though he was highly spiritual and highly intelligent, having a very profound conversation with the teachers of the temple, he could not perform the miracles. It is that Jesus who went to India and traveled through China and died in Japan. What convinced me was that the book had a very detailed description of the tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. And people can still search on the internet the tomb of Jesus in Japan and find detailed descriptions on credible journals or websites describing the tomb of Jesus in Japan, in Shingo Village, Japan. And this book explains in details what happened. And also there's a tomb next to the tomb of Jesus in Japan, which is a tomb of the brother of Jesus, and also has a lot of his hair buried in that tomb. And also there are a lot of research done on the people in Japan, in that village, seeing a sound that sounded like ancient Hebrew language. So there's a connection over there. But Christ, on the other hand, is a different entity according to the book. There's actually an ET who took on the body made by them that appeared to be the body of Jesus. So they actually look alike. But because the ET came into the body made by them, um, the ET remembered all the knowledge to perform miracles. So this became very interesting because in the Bible, when Christ began preaching, when he saw his mother, he didn't call his mother mother. He called his mother woman. That to me was a very strange phenomenon because in my culture, in the Chinese culture, calling your mother woman in front of other people is extremely disrespectful. And to me, it's very strange that Christ did that. And this made a lot of sense to me because the book explains that Christ was actually a different entity. It's different from Jesus. It's Christ who was able to perform miracles and preaching about spirituality and love. It's Christ who died on the cross, who was resurrected 3 days after, just to show people that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. But for some reason, even though the early Christians believed in reincarnation, the Catholic Church removed the concept of reincarnation from the ancient scriptures. So this is why most Christians nowadays do not believe in reincarnation, even though a lot of scientists like Dr. Ian Stevenson, Dr. Brian Weiss, Dr. Michael Newton, they did extensive research on the possibilities of reincarnation. And I do believe that we do have reincarnation. And actually the author of the book, Michel Desmarquet, was led by the ETs to see many of his past reincarnations. So this is a very interesting book, combining science, specific verifiable facts, and also knowledge of spirituality, ancient scriptures of the Bible, and also describing some of the projects that U.S. government did in the past, and specifically also mentions a different project in which the U.S. government was trying to develop a time machine. It reminds me of the Philadelphia experiment. Yeah, and people interested can do more research on this.
Thank you for the explanation. I'm not religious myself. When I look at a broader view of any religious story, especially one like the birth of Jesus, is something in the UK through school. You have to go through that every Christmas. You do the nativity story, and you do it in plays, and you read about it, regardless of how religious your school is. I think many folks like myself listening to this, they're all different camps of people, would believe if the story of Jesus was true, there is this concept, the Star of Bethlehem was some kind of orb or UFO. That's what the wise men followed. That's why they could follow it. It wasn't a star really high up in the sky, it was far lower down. And you would go as far with this book. Michel is saying Jesus was born later. Is that almost some sort of possession that an ET or an entity inhabits the body of Christ? Is that what that's getting at there? That when there's a real change between Jesus passing away in Japan and then an ET, and this sounds quite incredible, but what is the consensus there in the book that happens, that there's a second Jesus is one person, Christ is another?
Actually, the book explains in specific detail why they did it. Because the Hebrews were under the rules of the Roman Empire. And what happened was that the Roman Empire had a lot of different theological belief systems that were really not helpful for the spiritual development of the people at that time. So that's why they decided to intervene by sending Jesus and Christ to us to preach about spirituality and love. And actually, this is very important because the Creator is different from Jehovah as described in the Bible. The Creator is everything, is a creator of everything, including the stars, the planets, animals, plants, and people on Earth, and also on different planets. So the Creator also created the ETs, extraterrestrials, according to this book. But Jehovah, as described in the Bible, the Old Testament, they were actually ETs who were the watchers or guardians of the people on earth who were trying to help us to develop our spirituality. That actually explains why they helped Moses to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt, parting the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, but the Sea of Reeds, because at that time the ancient pharaohs were suppressing the spiritual practices or development of the Hebrews. So the duty, the principal duty of human beings on Earth or on different planets, on any planet, is to develop our spirituality. Whenever that became suppressed by the rulers, the ETs may intervene as they did to the people in the past, the ancient Hebrews. So this is why the reason why they took on the body made by them and as Christ to perform miracles was because at that time people were very stubborn. Unless someone were to perform miracles, the teachings of that person would not be believed. So the people at that time were highly skeptical. So they had to have someone who would be able to perform miracles in order for his preachings to be believed. So this is why they have to have another entity of Christ to perform all these miracles in order for his teachings to be believed. And fortunately and unfortunately, some of his teachings were kept and some of his teachings were removed from the Bible. So this is something that really struck me personally, because to me the stories in the Bible were just too good to be true. And but this analysis or explanation really caused me to believe that it's very logical that Christ came to us, and also um, from I'm Chinese. I also study astronomy in China, and China actually kept a very good astronomical records, and I can pinpoint the exact date of the birth of Jesus, of the Virgin Mary, and the exact date of the resurrection of Christ. So the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, because there's a astronomical record of China that tells the star that really stayed in the sky for 60 or 70 days, and that according to the astronomers and historians of China, and also Christians in China, that is exactly the Star of Bethlehem. And also, there are some signs descriptions in the Bible that match exactly the descriptions of the astronomical records of China that can pinpoint the date and the time of the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ.
So for you, it seems there's a lot of things that perhaps if you take the Bible at face value, there's a lot of unanswered questions or things that don't quite make sense. But then when you pair it with what Michel has written, a lot of those questions are answered, those gaps are filled in, and things begin to make more sense for you. And I wonder, is there anything for you in reading the book and your research? And you've met Michel, haven't you?
Yes, I met him
Yeah.
twice.
Why was Michel the person who was chosen? Why was he abducted, particularly him?
Well, there were a few reasons given by the book, by the ETs. First, he was a man of action. So he took immediate action. Everything that he does or did, he didn't delay anything. This is his personality. And the second reason was that he really had past reincarnations, like 80 past lives. And according to the ETs, only people like him could stay on their planet for 9 days or so, the maximum number of days. People like me or maybe others probably can only stay for 3 or 4 days on the planet because of maybe certain vibrations or something else. Only Michel, he had, because he had 80 past lives already, he could survive for as long as 9 days on their planet, and he had to come back, otherwise he would be dead as well. And the third reason, I think, is another reason is that he was a farmer in Australia, and he didn't have any preconceived notions or belief systems. He would accurately and honestly report everything he saw, he witnessed back to Earth. If they were to pick like a physicist or ufologist, then they would be afraid that that person would add in his or her own beliefs or analysis into the book. They wanted the book to be an honest description of what Michel saw and experienced. So this is very important. It's just like the Book of Enoch. When Michel after he came back from Thiaoouba, he was given by people or a close colleague of his, a Book of Enoch. And after reading the Book of Enoch, he found a striking resemblance of the descriptions of where Enoch went to and where he went to. And this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy or Jehovah Prophecy, is more like a modern version of the Book of Enoch or the book of the ancient scriptures. So I think this is some of the reasons why he was chosen.
There's a lot of themes explored in the book, not only abduction, but ancient civilizations such as Atlantis, the book touches on, and Mu as advanced civilizations perhaps lost to history. Do you think the stories point to real ET involvement in humanity's past, or are they perhaps more symbolic?
Well, real involvements, because the book actually tells the history of mankind on Earth. We did not evolve from apes or gorillas at all. We all came from different planets originally, about 1.35 million years ago. What happened was that the first settlements were the yellows and the blacks. Uh, the yellows landed in southern Myanmar, and the blacks landed in Australia. And a separate group of the blacks went to Africa. And then this is why people believe that the first people on Earth were the blacks in Africa. But actually, no, the yellows and the blacks came first. Afterwards, the ancestors of the Polynesians came and landed on the continent that existed before in the Pacific Ocean called Lemuria, or the continent of Mu, and establishing a very successful civilization. And from time to time, the ETs from Thiaoouba or Jehovah intervene, helping us to improve our spirituality or to grow our spirituality. They destroyed some of the cities that in which they were led by evil priests, and they intervened that way. They also appeared as gods or goddesses to the people in India, in which the Lemurians were trying to colonize. Uh, they were having a hard time to colonize people in India. So the ETs from Jehovah, being very beautiful, gigantic, or goddess-like, they appeared as angels or goddesses, so that the people in India believed that there were many, many gods or goddesses. It actually connects all the dots if you read the book. And also there were other uh, people who came to Earth later, like the Caucasians who came after the ancestors of the Polynesians. They landed in Atlantis and then established a civilization over there. But unfortunately, the continents of Lemuria and Atlantis disappeared almost overnight because of natural catastrophe. The continent sunk into the ocean almost overnight. The Hebrews came the latest, about 12,000 years ago, and they first landed in southern Russia because of accident, and then because of the weather, they migrated to the Middle East, where Israel is nowadays. And it's very interesting. If you read the book, you can read why the Hebrews were the chosen people by the Jehovah's, why they're having so many problems surviving on Earth nowadays, and why so many things happened to them during World War II. And the reasons were explained in the book. And actually, I questioned Michel Desmarquet why that's the case. And then he actually gave me a very interesting answer. I would encourage people to read the book to know the answers, why things happen this way, and it's very interesting and it would really blow your mind, and to the things that happened here. And it is, yes, we all came from different planets, and the ETs frequently intervene. The last intervention of the ETs happened, or as recorded in the book, actually came during World War II. Explains why, even though the Germans were well ahead of the development of the atomic bomb, um, and the US government turned out to be the first country to deploy the bomb in Japan. Explains the reason. And I did some research. The Germans indeed had a lot of research on the atomic bomb, uh, well ahead of the U.S. government, the U.S. scientists. If you do some research on the German atomic development, you're going to find a very important scientist called Dr. Heisenberg. If you do research, you're going to see that he did a lot of research that were far more advanced than the American scientists at that time. But for some reason, for some strange reason, he made a very stupid, inconceivable mistake. Um, and his report was read by Hitler, resulting in Hitler believing that the Germans didn't have enough resource to make the bomb. So this is why he gave up the plan for a very short period of time. Um, and the US government was able to develop the bomb successfully. That's actually due to ET's intervention. The ETs, specifically from Jehovah, they caused the Germans delay in developing the atomic bomb. So the US government was able to deploy the bomb in Japan, ending the World War II much earlier than if it didn't happen.
It's certainly an interesting idea having this interference from ETs over the decades, the centuries, the millennia going through. There's a lot of messages in the book around environmental damage, nuclear weapons causing issues, Are those messages any different to what a lot of other abductees would receive than Michel, or is there anything quite unique to him?
Well, for the environmental issues, it's actually very similar. The ETs from Thiaoouba, they are very keen to warning us that if we don't act now to protect our environment, then we probably wouldn't have a second chance. So they're encouraging people to be environmental and to focus on the damages that we have caused to Earth in the past and to mend our ways. But more importantly, the book focuses on spiritual evolvement or development. It says that, as I mentioned before, the principal obligation of any sentient beings or human beings on Earth or on different planets uh, is to develop our spirituality. Because when the Creator created every one of us, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each of our astral bodies. So we are part of the Creator, and the Creator is part of us. If through our physical bodies, the Creator can experience what we experience. So we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, according to the ETs. And when we pass, when we die, we give up our physical body, and our astral body goes back to our higher self after 3 days. And this is why Christ resurrected after 3 days, because this is the natural universal law, is that for a 3 day period of time, the astral body remains on earth. And then after 3 days, a portion of the astral body goes back to the higher self. And then there would be a life review process in which we would be able to review everything we did in a holographic film. We would be able to experience everything others experienced when we did certain things onto others. So we would have an evaluation process on how we did in our past life. In a sense, it's the evaluation of the creator or God because we are part of the creator. But in essence, we are evaluating how we did ourselves. So we would see, we would feel all the pains of the others felt when we did harmful things to the others. And then we would come up with the different lessons to learn in the next lifetime when we decide to reincarnate into the embryo of a family that will be chosen by us, and then our memories would be erased. We would go through what the ancient Nagas would call the river of oblivion, forgetting everything that happened in the past. So as newborns, we don't remember anything, but sometimes the memory is not entirely erased. So this is why some of the young children, as documented by Dr. Ian Stevenson, would remember their past lives. So there's a study on the possibility of reincarnation of children of different people in Asia, done by Dr. Ian Stevenson, that describes why some people would have certain memories of their past lives, and why certain birthmarks could be some of the injuries that they had in their past lives, and why some people would be fearful of water because they were drowned in their in their past lives. And after hypnosis, past life regression, when they learned about the reason of their like fear in this life, what happened to their past life, their fear of water or phobia would disappear after the hypnosis session, past life regression session. So this is a very interesting study that I would encourage people to look into. And this is actually explained by the ETs that we do have different reincarnations, and people learn different lessons through the different reincarnations. What we do in different lifetimes are just like different positions on a wheel. What goes up has to come down. We would need to experience different roles in different lifetimes to learn different spiritual lessons. So there's no need to envy or be jealous of the super wealthy, because they have different spiritual lessons to learn, and their lessons may be more challenging than the lessons of us. So we all have to experience different roles. We would become the richest person in the future reincarnations. We will become beggars on streets in different reincarnations. So this is the essence of the spiritual knowledge that the ETs told Michel Desmarquet. Yes, the lessons regarding environmental protection or issues on Earth is very similar, but at the same time, the book also contains other spiritual knowledge that's sometimes talked, sometimes not talked by other ET contactees.
I think you've summarised a lot of the book, the messages of the book, really well, Samuel, and given people a real good idea of what they can expect if they pick this up. And like I say, for me, it sounds like it's going to link a lot of gaps people may have, or fill in a lot of gaps between the spiritual, religious stories that we've been told, the idea of ETs and extraterrestrial civilizations being involved with us as a species, and kind of how those gaps fill in. Like I say, I want to move on to some other questions, and some of that will come back to the book, no doubt. But you mentioned you've met Michel, and I just want to work on what is he like as a person in later years. When was it you last spoke to him? You say you've met him twice.
Yes, the first time was in 2016, and the second time was in 2018, just a few months before he passed away. And as a real person, he is just a regular French Australian having a very thick French accent when he spoke English, and he was very cynical of what happens or what happened on Earth at that time. The reason he moved from Cairns, Australia, to Vietnam was that he really couldn't. After being shown, after being lived in a very perfect world, a perfect planet, just like paradise, he really couldn't bear with the things that happened on Earth. He had to live in a very remote place that resembled a little bit like the planet Thiaoouba. So that's why he chose Phu Quoc Island in Vietnam, southern Vietnam. It's a very beautiful island. And then he was very like cynical of the politicians of Earth. And then I remember that he was very critical of certain things that happened. I tried to ask him what's not written in the book, because in the postscript of the book it says there are far more incredible things that he knew and he learned but couldn't write in the book because the ETs didn't allow him to write in the book because we were far from understanding them. That actually struck me very much because I'm a very curious person and I wanted to know what else he knew but couldn't write in the book because the book contains so many specific verifiable facts and details revealing all the information, all the paranormal events that I wanted to know, giving logical explanations, connecting all the dots. I haven't mentioned about the Great Pyramid of Egypt yet, and also connecting all the things that people have been puzzled about. What else he knew but couldn't write in the book. So that's the whole purpose of me tracking him down and flying far away from Los Angeles to Phu Quoc Island, Vietnam, spending my own money. I was very poor at that time, not very wealthy. My own money, that's a very big investment to me, to track him down and to ask him in person what else he knew but couldn't write in the book. I spent 5 days the first time I met him, and I didn't know his address at that time. What happened was that I actually searched on the internet where he was living at that time, and then uh, accidentally, unfortunately, there were some tourists who met him by chance, and I contacted those tourists, and they refused to tell me exactly where he was living at that time because he didn't allow them to reveal his address. So what happened was that there was one tourist who posted a picture of his bungalow online, and I printed that picture out. And then I brought with me and flew to that island without knowing his exact address. And I showed that picture to a local taxi driver, telling him to take me to where the picture showed the bungalow. At the second try, the taxi driver took me to the right location. And then Michel was having an afternoon nap, and I waited until he woke up. And I explained my reason of visiting him, wanting to know more about the book, wanting to know more about what happened to him. And he was actually very annoyed at me because he didn't want to be bothered. He was a very kind of unfriendly person in the very beginning. But since I was there, I just wanted to kind of befriend him and to establish a good relationship so that he would be able to reveal what happened to him and more details about his experience. I played chess with him. He was a very good chess player, and I lost. So while I was playing chess with him, uh, I was thinking that his attention would be focused on playing chess. So I asked him some questions about his experience, about the book, uh, believing that because his attention was in playing chess, he would kind of be distracted. But he kept his mouth shut. He didn't say anything outside of the book. I was kind of very disappointed. So I just befriended him and chatted with him about random things, about life in Vietnam, about his marriage, about some of the other things. Um, the day before I was about to depart, he showed me a contract that he signed with a Chinese publisher. He asked me to follow up with the publisher because even though the publisher paid him $2,000 of royalty fee, the copyright fee, he never heard back from the publisher, a Chinese publisher. He wanted me to contact them and to see whether the book was published in China or not. I was so happy at that moment because finally there's a chance, there's a way for me to really do something for him. If I did something for him, hopefully he could reveal some of the things that he couldn't write in the book. So I was extremely happy. I took on the job, and I because I'm Chinese, I know how to contact different publishers in China, and I contacted that publisher. It turned out that the publisher, after paying him $2,000, decided not to have the book published in China because of the fear of censorship. I tried to convince them to get it published as a fiction. They said no, because if they did that, they would lose their jobs. So that's the final answer. So I reported back to Michel, and he told me find a different publisher, whether that's a publisher in Hong Kong, in China, in Taiwan, or even Singapore. As long as you can publish that in Chinese, I'm fine with that. So he said that to me. So I took on the job to find a different publisher. So that's why through personal relationship, I was able to reach a consultant that used to be the president of the China Writers Publishing House, and then had a book published as a non-science, as a science fiction, and then later on had it published in Taiwan as a non-fiction. So he was very happy. So he was able to invite me for a second time and to tell me the things that he couldn't write in the book in person.
You mentioned something about the Great Pyramid that you hadn't had a chance to mention. What was it about the Great Pyramid that was in the book?
The Great Pyramid of Egypt was definitely not a tomb of the pharaohs. According to the ETs, they told Michel that the Pyramid of of Egypt was actually an energy center built by a great, wise, learned person from Atlantis called Thoth. I know a lot of Egyptians consider Thoth to be a god, but he was a real person, a very wise person. And he built the Great Pyramid of Egypt about 17,000 years ago. Because he had the knowledge, he was able to use anti-gravitational technologies and supersonic vibratory systems to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner, so that he was able to align the huge stones perfectly so that it can capture the uh, terrestrial and cosmic energies. And the Great Pyramid was actually used by the ancient pharaohs correctly, because the ancient pharaohs sat in the middle of the pyramid in the king's chamber and meditated and communicated with people on different planets. They also used the pyramid to make rain. There is actually a scientific paper by University of Reading um, talking about the energy that they can project into sky, uh, and then to make rain, and the clouds would form. So there are different scientific researches of projecting certain energies into the sky that rain would fall. So they did that in ancient Egypt. So that's why they were able to have a lot of plants and agriculture activities at that time. And actually, in ancient civilizations such as Lemuria, about 250,000 years ago, there was another great pyramid at the northwestern corner of that continent that's 3 times as large as the Great Pyramid of Egypt, according to the ETs, that they were able to build it using the same technologies and then to make rain. So that's why Lemuria was a very successful civilization. And then they also made statues like the moas on Easter Island. So when you see the moas, the statues on Easter Island, you can imagine the technologies being used to build the moas, and also to build the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and also other pyramids as well. So this is a very interesting revelation, and I know for a fact that they recently discovered subterranean or underground structures of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and also discovered the underground chambers beneath the Sphinx of Egypt, using modern radar technologies. And Michel Desmarquet actually revealed one of the things that he didn't write in the book is regarding the chambers beneath the Sphinx. He says that there are 3 chambers yet to be discovered by us, by scientists, that contain knowledge of the past. When the time is right, they can be opened, and when they're opened, everything will be known. But if you use explosives by trying to open it not the right way, they will not be opened. It's only when we are ready the 3 chambers can be opened. Because according to Dr. Tom Chuckle, the technologies contained in the 3 chambers beneath the Sphinx can help us, but can also destroy us. So we have to be spiritually ready in order to utilize the knowledge the correct way.
I want to get onto some listener questions just before we kind of finish off, Samuel. But I wonder, let me ask you, how comfortable are you speaking about UFOs, even though you're in the US, but having that background, being from China, being a Chinese citizen from birth? Do you feel or fear any consequences talking so openly about the subject?
I don't have any fear because I know even if I die for one reason or another, I would reincarnate here on Earth or on a different planet. So death, people have fear of death So this is something that the book talks about. The feeling of pain or suffer or suffering is the very short. And then when we die, there's a moment of bliss, a very blissful feeling, as reported by people who have near-death experiences. So back to the question, Gandhi did a lot of good things in India, um, using nonviolent resistance against the British Empire or colonists. And Dr. Martin Luther King also did a lot of great things. Both of these people were assassinated, and but they had a lasting effect of on the people, and probably better than, I don't know, like any other historical figures on earth, politicians or historical figures other than Christ or the Buddha. So I think um, the fear is not really something that I would envision to be an obstacle for me to speak publicly about UFOs or the secrets or some of the things that would be really cause a lot of concerns of the establishment. I think I would use my effort to promote the knowledge that everyone should be able to understand and know that we are all creators of the Creator, and we are all sentient beings having a journey, a spiritual journey on Earth, to really learn about the different lessons. And it's very important that we make the right choices in the future. And actually, the book talks about the four real dangers on Earth. Number one is money. Number two, politicians. Number three, journalists and drugs, hallucinogenic drugs. And number four, religions. We should be spiritual but not religious. And in fact, religions distort the spiritual messages of the spiritual masters of the past. Is detailed in the book. So I have no fear speaking on this subject in China or elsewhere because I would find ways to insinuate the messages of spirituality and also historical facts to as many people as possible.
Well, let's move on to listener questions. But if people want to pick up a copy of the book, the best place to do that is on Amazon. And of course, Samuel, it's not yourself that's written the book, it is Michel. Do you want to just let folks know again the name of the book and the author and how they can pick that up?
Yeah, the name of the book is Thiaoouba Prophecy, Abduction to the Ninth Planet. So this book can be found on Amazon. It's also in audio form. It's in audiobook on Audible. It's read by a British person. So it's a very good audio quality.
I'll put those links in the description, folks. But listen, Samuel, lots of people with questions for you sent those over. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions. I'll try and get through as many as possible right now with Samuel. Let's get started, Samuel. A question from Nick. Nick asks, what does Samuel make of comments from individuals like Ross Coulthart, who suggest China is in the process of surpassing the US's advancements in electrogravitics?
Um, I think China, the government is doing their own thing. I think the more important aspect for China, actually, this is the reason that I reach out to you, is that China is undergoing a massive movement by its public. So China with this population size, with the size of the population, um, there's a grassroots movement of wakening up to the spiritual aspect of certain things. So even though the government is trying to control the media, the censorship, I think it's the power of the public that really can make great changes in the future. If you really look at the history of China or other countries, great revolutions always come from the public, from the mass. It's always come from the bottom up process, not the top down process. So a lot of people have been trying to really putting a lot of efforts in having the president or the Congress or the government officials to disclose certain things. That's good effort. I think the better effort would be causing this grassroots movement from the public in China and in the US or in the UK or in Europe or any other country, India, or for example, for the public to start to wake up, to understand the significance of the disclosure of ETs, UFOs, or UAPs, and also the consequences of the disclosure, especially in terms of the technologies, and also in terms of the religious beliefs, theological implications of the disclosure. And I would strongly encourage people to read the book, because the book really discloses how they're able to travel higher or faster than speed of light, even though they didn't disclose a lot of the technical aspect. But it discloses um, what's needed in intergalactic travel. When you are traveling at super high speed, faster than speed of light, you would need to have antimatter guns to destroy space dusts or asteroids that come near to the spaceship. You would also learn about other technologies that we, the people, can utilize effectively to improve our health and well-beings. For example, the technologies of uh, using colors to heal ourselves, because colors are very important. Actually, if you do some research, chromotherapy, the therapy using different colors, was very popular in the United States in the 1920s, before they discovered antibiotics. And the FDA cracked down on chromotherapy, or the therapy using colors. And there are a lot of scientific studies on the effects of different colors on the human health system. For example, the color green can help with migraines, and the color blue can kill bacteria and viruses and things like that. And color red can energize people, and color pink can make people lose their muscle strength by 30%. And actually, if you do research, you're going to understand that there's a football coach in the U.S. That knew about this, and he painted the locker rooms of the visiting teams into pink color, and he never lost a home game. So you're going to learn a lot of secrets and technologies that the ET used to help themselves, and also could potentially help us, the readers, from this book. So this is the difference. So I think the movement at the grassroots level in China and in the U.S. is going to be more important than the disclosure from the government.
A question from Spectre, and people may remember Spectre as S, who I had on the podcast anonymously a few weeks ago talking about the Hellfire missile from the hearings. Spectre asks, here in the West, governments have framed the topic of UFOs as a technology or national security issue. How do the government and more generally the Chinese people view the topic currently?
Well, the Chinese people don't have as much fear as some of the U.S. government people have, because the Chinese government really doesn't have any narratives on the UFOs or ETs. I think the fear that people have in the US or the Western world mostly comes from the narratives of the governments or the military industrial complex, so that they can get more funding on the or to improve their defense contracts or systems. The Chinese government doesn't really say anything that the ET is a threat to the national security or anything like that. So the Chinese public doesn't have any fear of the presence of the ETs or the contacts of the ETs. To the people in the West, I would say that if you really think about it, if the ETs really wanted to destroy us, why wait now? Why not do that in the past when we had less developed technologies or defense technologies? Um, Actually, if you read the books, if you read the ancient scriptures as well, you're going to find out that the ETs, especially ETs from Jehovah, they are trying to assist us directly and indirectly. They destroyed the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah because the citizens of the two cities were so evil. So they destroyed the evil people who really had no way of uh, coming back to the path of spiritual development. And they destroyed the bad guys, and also they helped the righteous people, the people who are on the path of spiritual development. So they help us directly or indirectly. And also, I would use another analogy is that have you ever wondered why we have not gone back to the moon for the last 50 years? The reason is that we are warned off from the moon. Because if you read the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, you're going to realize and understand why there are ET bases on the far side of the moon and how they were built and the reason why they did it. And it's not to watch us, it's actually something else related to the migration of the people from a planet to Earth in the past. And the reason they're warning us from going back to the moon is that we are not spiritually ready. Imagine if you go to the moon, go to a zoo, for example, would you invite the gorillas fighting amongst themselves to your beautiful mansion and to make a mess? You wouldn't, because they're not ready to behave in a very civilized manner. They're not ready spiritually. So similarly, um, they would prevent others to make a mess in our room, in Earth. They would prevent less civilized people from visiting us as well. It goes both ways. We are prevented to make a mess in other rooms, and they would prevent others to make a mess in our rooms. As long as we are not ready, we are contained in an earthly environment, and to really to until we are able to develop successfully spiritually.
Question from Long Knife. It's a two-part question. He asks, what are the most common shapes for UFOs in China? Are there many black triangles? And separately, have the Chinese military sites had any drone flaps similar to what the US and the UK bases have had?
Well, China in the recent years, especially, did have a lot of kind of UAP phenomena over there, and they were actually shot by the citizens over there. The most common shapes would be like not triangular shape, but either spherical or kind of uh, like like changing shapes. Sometimes it's spherical, sometimes it's kind of rounded, but not exactly spherical. And they would move very fast at very fast speed in China in the sky, and people would document that and then send among themselves, and the government would be kind of. Has no comment on those at all, and sometimes a lot of the government officials they have no explanation either. um, and and a lot of the Chinese people they would be very surprised at that. They would see that as a phenomenon, and they don't have any explanation either.
And what are the most common shapes seen in China? Is it very similar to the West where you have saucers, triangles, huge rectangular shape? Is there anything different?
I would say like saucers and uh, I haven't seen any triangle shapes in China yet, uh, but mostly like saucers kind of like shapes. And in terms of the drones, there I don't see any reports of those in China, and sometimes they would see the drone reports of drones in the Western world. In China, I don't see those.
Thank you. Trevsey asks, I'd be interested to know the media situation in China and how reliable it is, whether or not there's trust between the people and the media or government for them to accurately report upon what happens.
Well, the media does not report anything uh, related to ET contact at all. Even though there's a very popular Chinese person, well, actually, there are several Chinese people who claim to have ET contact, the government doesn't really say anything at all. And then for the UAP UFO phenomenon, if their government official press reporting on that phenomenon, they would just say, oh, they have no information about it. They don't know what it is, but there's a documented appearance of UAPs or UFOs in the sky in which they saw, or some people saw. It's mostly by the local Chinese media, like the provincial or the municipal Chinese media. For the central Chinese media, they do not report on this at all. This is the Chinese government media policy. They do not report on this kind of phenomena at all.
John asks a question. He asked a few questions, but we've covered those already. But one he did ask is, do you think there's any chance of whistleblowers coming forward to speak out in China, similar to what's happened in the United States? Or is the situation with the government so difficult it would be so hard for a whistleblower to come forward and speak about UFOs in China?
Don't foresee any whistleblowers from China speaking up, because if the government has a secret research on the UFOs, reverse engineering their technologies, it would be under strict control. Anyone who tried to speak out, if there were such projects, anyone who tried to speak out would be killed immediately. There wouldn't be any protections at all, and they have no qualms of killing anyone in China if there's such program over there. I wouldn't suggest there would be any secret programs in China. If there were, then they would be in collaboration of the U.S. government or the Australian government. Uh, Remember, like, when people think about this issue, they always think about whether that's the Chinese or American or Australian or the UK or the Russian government. Um, from this book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, it implies that the industrial complex that we are facing against is not a national industrial complex. It's an international coalition. It's not like, to them, there's no concept of countries or borders. It's them. They would have members from different countries. There will be a representative from Russia. There will be a representative from China or Japan or India or the UK or New Zealand or Australia. It is not. They don't have the concept of nations. To them, it's just a national coalition or the cabal. Uh, it's we have to understand the concept of nations is a political idea aimed at profiting the elite, the top, and also the idea insinuated or tried to convey it in the book is that uh, if you have a politician, whether it's a Republican or Democrat, whether it's conservative or labor, they are actually controlled or manipulated by a group of people that remains in power forever. So the politicians are just puppets in the show. And the people who are really controlling everything stay behind the scenes. And those people are probably not the people frequently reported by the press. Um, I actually happened to translate it to translate a different book from German into English, written by the former highest degree chair of a secret society that was founded in Germany. And I came to the conclusion that even though the book doesn't really mention the word Illuminati, the book talks about the Illuminati. It talks about how they control or manipulate the politicians and the businesses and the corporations. So people need to understand that it's not the Chinese or the Americans. It's the cabal, the industrial complex, military industrial complex versus the people who are not them. People need to change their ways of thinking.
Ansis Gold asks if someone in China saw a UAP or a UFO and they told one of their co-workers, is there a stigma? What would the conversation be like? Is that something that someone would do, Samuel, in modern day China, report a UFO sighting to a friend or colleague?
Well, it depends whether the person is brainwashed by the scientists or not, or by the textbooks or not. To the people, to the general public, Chinese people would believe encounters or scenes of UFOs or UAPs because they have read the stories in the past. There are stories of people coming to this world and establishing contact with the Chinese people in the past. But for the people who kind of are brainwashed by the medical establishment or the other establishments, they wouldn't believe anything like that. The conversation would depends on who you talk to, would go like, oh yes, either oh yes, I believe that I had encounters in the past, I had dreams about it in the past, or it's nonsense, it doesn't really exist. So it really depends on whether the person is brainwashed by the establishment or not.
Thank you for that answer. Um, Actor designer, it's a bit of a longer question. Before the disclosure movement began to gather steam in the United States circa 2017, China's People's Daily was covering UAP reports as straight news. We'd been taught in the West to regard China with a combination of pity and suspicion, a place where truth was suppressed as a matter of course. So, seeing the official party organ of the Communist Party in China soberly discussing a topic that our own government and media has so soundly and consistently dismissed as paranoid fantasy was startling, to say the least. Is it fair to assume that the Communist Party in China was encouraging or at least permitting open, serious discussion of the phenomenon? And if so, was it generally believed in China that some kind of scientific rigour was being applied to understand it?
Well, to answer this question, I think the Chinese government is going to keep silent on this issue for the foreseeable future, while allowing the media to report on the testimonies of the people in the U.S. And not the official media, but the media by the public. And remember, in China, not many people listen or watch the official media anymore. People in public, or a majority of the people, would watch or listen to media by the public or by the internet celebrities or the equivalent in China, the influencers in China. So the government official media doesn't have a lot of influence on the Chinese population anymore, except for certain areas such as politics or law. Um, the majority of the people spend most of their time watching the reports by internet celebrities. So I think this is the difference between China and the US. The US people, the people in the Western world, are still waiting for the official government disclosure, while the Chinese people are starting to wake up at the grassroots level. And I think waking up at the grassroots level is going to become more effective than the official disclosure. I'll give you one more example. Is the power of inertia. Because if you really look at the great revolutions in the world, if you really look at it, the most long-lasting ones, the most effective ones, always come from the people. Like I want to make example of Chairman Mao. He was able to successfully unite the Chinese continent, the mainland of China, was because he started the revolution at the grassroots level, from the rural parts of China. If you look at the histories of China, you're going to see that dynasties after dynasties after dynasties, the revolutions always start at the rural parts of China. Similarly, in other countries of the world, I believe it's always the same as well. So do not expect the governments to disclose everything or anything that would change the ways of people's lives. Expect something at the grassroots level. And the grassroots movement will be effective in China and elsewhere in the world.
A few folks asked a question along this same line, Samuel. Mad in a Good Way, Claire, and a couple of others. Does China have anything like a disclosure plan, do you think?
Well, I don't see any plans of disclosure from the official channels of the Chinese government, because they have a lot of other things to worry about. For example, unemployment, the relationship with Taiwan, and also the economy. And also, they have a lot of things internally they have to take care of. For example, the political power struggles, and also the instability of the Chinese government, things like that. So they have a lot of things on their plate to worry about. They wouldn't necessarily want to take the time to disclose something that wouldn't have any tangible effect to the stability of the country. So I don't foresee any disclosure from the Chinese government. However, I do see that the attitude towards the ET contact in the future, or the possibilities of extraterrestrials taking hold in the Chinese public, I see that gradually taking effect.
I'm going to ask you to speculate here because, as far as we know, you're not part of the Chinese government at the moment. So, how do you think the Chinese government would react if the US did come out and disclose? If we got a general statement from the United States to say, we believe we have proof of alien life, or we have been visited, or we have alien technology. How do you see China reacting to that?
I see that China is going to report as a news, and then make no comment of it, and then the Chinese public, is going to discuss it online and among themselves, and to see if there's going to be a Chinese heroic figure that's going to come out and to disclose everything that corroborates with the disclosure or content of the U.S. Witnesses. And then I'm going to say that perhaps the Chinese government is going to pick one of the ET contactees, or maybe a few of them, that among the Chinese population who claim to have had ET contact, and to conduct official research on those a few ET contactees, and then draw their own conclusions. However, I want to say this: the ET contactees in China that have researched so far have very good evidence, but the information contained in their disclosure, or ET contactees, is not as specific as those contained in the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, because there's just not enough specific verifiable facts that would convince me to have any positive values or consequences to the people who learn about such ET contacts.
Hopeless Diamond asked a question. Could you tell us any more about the September 11th, 2010 incident at, is it Baotao Airport?
Um, if I remember it correctly, then they did see some strange objects in the sky, but I don't remember the details. Uh,
It was Inner
how,
Mongolia, and the airport was temporarily shut down after air traffic controllers detected a UFO on radar. I don't know if there is much more information than that, but
yes, yes, yes. Um, there were actually not just one incident. There were several incidents in which the airports of China were shut down because of UFO or UAPs in the sky, and they reported as news, but they didn't make any comments. There are also encounters of close ET contacts in the Chinese media of several people, but there were several incidents in which the airports were shut down because of this.
Metal Matt asks a question, and I think you may have touched on this earlier, Samuel. What does Samuel think about the most famous Chinese UFO incident in 1994, the encounter of Lumberjack, and excuse my pronunciation here, Meng Xiaoguo in Heilongjiang province?
Yes, I believe that's a credible account of what happened to him, Mr. Meng. He actually encountered UFO in the forest of northeastern northeastern part of China, and he had some kind of uh, effects that were diagnosed of radiation effects. Um, I would say that if any contacts with the ETs that resulted in radioactive effects on the physical body of the ET contactee, I would be very suspicious whether that would be a man-made UAP or UFO versus a real ET, a real UFO from out of Earth, because there's a universal rule is that when you are in contact with ETs, you are not to harm the ETs at all, and you are not to intervene unless you are given permission to intervene. So that incident in northeastern part of China would violate the rules of ET contacts. So I would suspect that the UFO or UAP was actually man-made by a secret program on Earth, just to test to see how the Chinese people would react to such an incident. And there are such secret programs in the world in which they would test different races of people and to see how they would react or respond to such proposed ET contacts or ET incidents or impregnations. So I would say that that's a credible account, but he was probably uh, in, interacting with a secret government program from Earth.
Similar to what researcher Melinda Leslie would talk about with her MILAB abductions and military abductions and hybrid programs and human alien, collaborations, I think is the word I'm looking for there. Couple of questions to finish off, Samuel. You've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the listeners and viewers will too. Algo says, great to get a new perspective. Thank you, Samuel, for joining the conversation. I'm interested to hear what UAP research and lore exist in China previous to 1950, and especially what connection there is to accounts of the paranormal and to Chinese mythology.
Did you say before 1950?
Yeah, 1950, so going back, yeah.
So before the Chinese Communist Party came to power in the mainland of China, there were a lot of so before that period of time, most of the research, most of the documents were written in classical Chinese language, and there were anecdotal accounts of people encountering ETs. For example, there is a very famous account of a person who got lost in a forest, and then he met a person resting on a branch of tree, and then he was asking directions from that person, and that person was giving him directions, and also they started to have a chat. And the Chinese person who lost asked him, like, where did you come from? And that person said, oh, I came from the back of the moon, uh, the far side of the moon. And then, like, there were also exchanges of conversation in which asks how did he get here, what were they doing in the back of the moon, and that person said they were building some structures in the back of the moon. So this is documented in the Chinese texts. And also, Chinese emperors were very superstitious of certain events that happen in the sky. For example, if the moon goes off, if the sun is having a lunar or solar eclipse, they will be very highly uh, reflective because they believe that it must be something that they did incorrectly, causing the sky to behave that way. So there were documents like that, and also there were encounters of ETs as documented in the Chinese classical texts that were very highly I would say read like a science fiction, but they would seem to be having certain validities if we look at it nowadays. That deserves a lot of special attention. But since they were written in classical Chinese, the language would be vague and also not specific and not detailed enough for a lot of modern scientists to do sufficient research.
And final question, Kevin says, great guest. How popular is the three body problem in China, and has dark forest theory influenced ufology in his opinion?
Well, the three body problem is a science fiction in China. It's a pure science fiction, and everyone knows about it in China. It's a humongously popular, and also people. It's the number one science fiction work in China, like top 20 science fiction works, and they're always the top one or two or something like that. Uh, and people see it as a science fiction, and because it doesn't have a lot of specific verifiable details as the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, people just enjoy it as a science fiction and don't think much of it. It's very different from the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, because the book Thiaoouba Prophecy kind of conveys certain issues that present to the readers as their day-to-day issues. So they kind of connect their day-to-day life to the book. And also it connects a lot of the things that the Chinese people see as their problems, uh, their own problems, the problems of their cities, of their provinces, and also their country as well. So they see this book as a book of enlightenment to respond to the challenges of their lives and how to respond it correctly so that they can change their daily lives, their cities, their provinces, also their countries in a very positive manner, and without any loss to their lives. So this is this is the reason why this book is very popular among the academics and also the people who are not in the academic world, because it talks about nonviolent resistance. So it has a lot of implications. Similar to what Gandhi did in India, it talks about the real effective way of changing the situation is nonviolent resistance at the grassroots level. So that has a lot of significance or impact to the Chinese people.
The Chinese television version of the three body problem, I watched that on YouTube a couple of years ago. and it's one of the best series I've watched in years. It's much longer than the US UK Netflix version, but it's very much worth it for the payoff, the storytelling, and it's much closer to the book than what the Netflix version was, let's just say. So I look forward to a second season of that. And Samuel, listen, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything you want to finish off on to let folks know how they can follow you, how they can get in touch with you? You've been wonderful to listen to, so thank you very much.
Yeah, they can find me on Facebook by doing a search of my name. They can also search me on search engines like Google or Bing. And I do want to encourage people to get a book because it talks about how to respond to the challenges in life, which is to look inside for answers. For the kingdom of God is within you, says in the Bible.
Samuel, thank you so much for your time, and I'll definitely have to have you back on in the future.
Thank you, Andy.
I'll